Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide, a reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that Hurricane Katrina began as a tropical storm before becoming a powerful hurricane that left 80% of New Orleans underwater? Learn how the Coast Guard rescued more than 34,000 people, while private boats rescued stranded neighbors. Learn that more than 1,800 people lost their lives and that the hurricane caused an estimated $125 billion in damage over 90,000 square miles of land. Discover how disasters like hurricanes can teach us the importance of having an emergency plan before a crisis happens.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you are joining us because, well, we have a really intense mission today.
Yeah, it's a heavy one, but an important one.
Right. We are unpacking the staggering scale, the human cost, and honestly, the profound lessons of Hurricane Katrina. It is just one of the most consequential natural disasters in U.S. history.
Absolutely.
And we want to set the expectation right up front for you listening. We aren't just going to rattle off a timeline and statistics, right? We're looking at the heroic acts of survival and some really sobering prophetic truths about how we prepare for the unthinkable.
Because there is so much more to this than just the meteorology.
Well, for sure. But, I mean, even just the physical power of the storm is mind-blowing. I was looking at the source material, and it's that Katrina pushed 400 miles inland.
Yeah, it's wild.
And even then, it was still maintaining winds of 100 to 140 miles per hour. That is just unbelievable to me.
It really defies our common sense. Normally when a hurricane hits land, the land acts like a giant brake.
Right. It loses its fuel, the warm water.
Exactly. It downgrades into a tropical storm and just becomes a rain event. But to understand the human tragedy, you really have to understand the terrifying physical evolution of this particular storm.
Because it morphs so fast, didn't it?
Very fast. It started out over the Bahamas in the Atlantic, and at that point, it was just a minor tropical storm.
So it's a disorganized cluster, really.
Right. But then it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, and the water was just exceptionally warm. That is the catalyst. By the early morning of August 23, 2005, it made landfall on the Gulf Coast.
As a Category 5 hurricane, which is, the absolute top of the scale.
Yeah. The peak wind speeds were exceeding 175 miles per hour at landfall.
Wow.
And it wasn't just the speed, it was the massive footprint. It impacted about 90,000 square miles of land.
90,000 square mile.
Making it the largest and I think the third strongest recorded hurricane in the United States.
That sheer size has to be why it had such incredible staying power. Because, going back to that inland wind speed, I want to try to help you visualize this if you're listening. Think about driving from Boston down to Washington, D.C.
That's a long drive.
It's about 400 miles. Now imagine making that entire drive, and for that entire distance, there is a continuous hurricane force wind just tearing through the landscape.
Just destroying everything.
Right. How does a storm system manage to hold on to that kind of destructive kinetic energy so far away from the ocean?
Well, it's because it was so massive. Even as the eye moved over land, the outer bands were still out over the warm Gulf waters, drawing in heat.
So it was still plugged in, basically.
Exactly. And that relentless driving force eventually meets the highly vulnerable geography of New Orleans.
Which is essentially a bowl.
Right. A bowl surrounded by water. And that geography forced the citizens into a series of just impossible split-second decisions.
Where there were really no safe options. I mean, government officials did issue mandatory evacuation orders.
They did. Safety preparations were made days in advance.
But despite those warnings, only about 80% of the people evacuated.
Leaving 20% behind.
Now we have to talk about the fates of that 20%. Because more than 10,000 people sought shelter in the Superdome sports arena. That was the designated safe haven.
And then others stayed in their homes, just hoping to wait it out.
And both of those choices became complete disasters.
They did.
Because I want to push back gently on this, because people looking back often judge those who stayed behind. Like, why didn't you just leave? But imagine doing exactly what you're told, right? You go to the designated ultimate safe haven, the Superdome, only to have the roof literally collapse on you from the heavy rain. It flooded all the people huddled below. It completely shatters the illusion of safety.
It is a profound structural betrayal. You did the right thing, and the building failed you.
Exactly.
And meanwhile, the people in their homes were facing something even worse, a 20-foot storm surge.
20 feet. That is a 2-story house.
Yeah. An estimated 80% in New Orleans was underwater. up to 20 feet deep in some places.
So they were completely trapped,
Completely. The only place to go was up. They had to seek safety on their rooftops.
breaking through their own attics with axes just to sit on the roof and wait for rescue helicopters.
And that shifts the entire survival narrative. With formal shelters compromised and the city totally submerged, survival just came down to the sheer willpower of the rescuers.
And a really devastating realization of who was left behind. Let's talk about that massive rescue effort. Because the Coast Guard alone saved more than 34,000 lives in New Orleans.
The logistics of that are just staggering.
Hovering helicopters over toxic floodwaters, plucking people off roofs. But what really stands out to me in the sources is the grassroots response.
The Cajun Navy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyday people with private boats. They hitched up their trailers, drove into a disaster zone, and rescued their neighbors. Local citizens offering food and shelter wherever they could. It's just a spontaneous armada of heroes.
It's incredible. But despite all that heroism, the heartbreaking toll is just undeniable.
Yeah, 1,836 people died in total.
And the geography of that loss is very concentrated. 1,577 lives were lost in Louisiana and 238 in Mississippi.
And we really need to emphasize the vulnerability aspect here, because the source material points out that more than half of all those victims were senior citizens.
That is a staggering statistic.
It is. When we see that over half the victims were senior citizens, what does that tell us about the blind spots in our modern emergency evacuation plans?
Well, it tells us that those plans heavily rely on mobility. They assume you have a car, you can drive, you have money for gas, and you are healthy enough to sit in endless traffic.
And if you are elderly or rely on medical equipment?
You are stranded. The system just isn't built for you.
Wow. And the lingering heartbreak of this is just, the sources note that as recently as 2014, 705 people were still officially reported missing.
So many families never got closure.
Never. And then there's the financial impact. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their homes.
Total devastation. Flooding damages across Florida, Louisiana, and Alabama totaled over $125 billion.
$125 billion.
And the total economic impact just in Louisiana and Mississippi likely exceeded $150 billion.
It is almost too big to wrap your mind around. Looking at the sheer loss of life and property, the natural response is to ask, well, how do we possibly prepare for the next disaster?
Because there will be another one.
Right. And the source material offers this really striking dual approach to surviving the unthinkable. It combines extremely practical preparedness with this profound prophetic truth.
Yeah, the core practical lesson is acceptance. You cannot prevent or anticipate all disasters.
You can't stop a hurricane.
Exactly. But you must prepare and practice.
And they list really specific prep steps. First, you have to identify potential threats in your area.
Know what you're up against.
Right. Have a family plan. Know exactly where to go for safety and evacuation.
And then the supplies. Keep an emergency supply of food, safe drinking water, medicines.
Which is huge for the seniors we just talked about.
Absolutely. Also clothing and cash.
Because ATMs don't work without power.
Good point.
They also highlight a very modern necessity, which is arranging a backup source of power for cell phones.
If you are on a roof, your phone is your only lifeline.
But here's where it gets fascinating. We go from incredibly mundane modern advice like remembering to buy a backup battery for your phone, straight into ancient prophetic warnings of sword, famine, and pestilence.
It is a profound transition.
The source reminds us that tragic things happen every day, but then it cites the prophet Joseph Smith.
Right, who declared a very specific truth.
Yeah.
That we should not be discouraged when told of perilous times.
Because they must come.
Exactly. He prophesied that the sword, famine, and pestilence are approaching, and there will be great destructions upon the face of the land.
And the quote emphasizes that not one jot or tittle of the holy prophet's prophecies shall fail, and that many are yet to be fulfilled.
It is a very stark reality.
It really is. So I have to ask, how does accepting this reality, that these perilous times and destructions are a guaranteed prophetic truth, how does that actually change our daily mindset when we are packing that emergency bag?
It shifts the motivation completely. It moves you away from panic or anxiety and moves you toward purposeful readiness. If you know these things are prophesied, you aren't caught off guard. You prepare out of obedience and awareness, not fear.
That makes a lot of sense. The prophecy validates the practical preparation.
Precisely.
Well, let's briefly tie this whole deep dive together. We started with the awe-inspiring power of Katrina, those 175-mile-per-hour winds at landfall.
And the terrifying reality of a 20-foot floodwater surge trapping people.
Right, and the everyday heroes in private boats pulling their neighbors to safety. and ultimately the vital importance of being both physically and spiritually prepared for these perilous times.
It's a lot to process.
It is, which is why I want to ask you, the listener, a direct reflection question posed by the source material. Have you or someone you know ever been in a flood, fire, or hurricane?
It's important to think about.
What kind of service was given to help, and what lessons were learned from that experience?
Examining our own history is the first step to readiness.
Definitely. And I want to leave you with one final kind of provocative thought to mull over on your own today.
Okay.
Given that Katrina fundamentally exposed the limits of government rescue, if an unpreventable disaster struck your own city tomorrow and communications went completely dark, who are the 3 neighbors you would check on first?
Oh, that's a good question.
And more importantly, do those neighbors know the evacuation plan?
Something we all need to figure out.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay safe and stay prepared.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.